worse. And I have a lot of different kinds of photography I'll be sharing with you, not just birds, but other types of photography. Many of us, if we're interested in birds, we're often interested in insects and mammals and reptiles and landscapes and things like that. So you'll be seeing some examples from that. I got started in photography as a 16-year-old. I was always interested in wildlife. I was the nerdy little athlete. I was athlete and a nerd. It was a great combination. And at age 8, I asked for the Audubon Encyclopedia of Animal Life. And I was the even nerdier little 8, 9, and 10-year-old who actually read it. So I was the kid going, no, that's a pangolin. That's no, that's, that's an owl monkey. So I've always had a passion for wildlife. And at age 16, my mother had a Canon AE1 with a broken meter, which meant the camera gave me no guidance on exposure. And I read John Shaw's nature photography book, and he talked about the Sunny F16 rule. So the Sunny F16 rule says, whatever your ISO is, if the sun is bright and behind you, shining on your subject in front of you, your proper exposure is 1 over your ISO for your shutter speed with an F16. And then I did all the calculations in my head. So I was forced to learn all the manual mode of photography from the very beginning because I had a broken camera. Everything else worked fine except the meter, which was great for me in the long run. I got started as a birder. So I am a birder and a photographer. I don't have arguments with myself or get upset with myself because I understand the dynamics of both. But I am both. I got started in birding on my first trip to Big Bend National Park here in West Texas in 1988. My grandparents brought me out. I photographed a bird, and I knew birds in general. And I thought, man, that looks like a sparrow on steroids. And being one of only 2 grandchildren on either side, that means I was very spoiled. If you haven't figured that out, I simply said, Mimi, Papa, you need to buy me a field guide. And being the wonderful grandparents they were, they dutifully did. And I began to look through that field guide and see Kaleema warbler and varied bunting and all these birds that were unique to the Southwest. And it stirred my interest. And 3 years later, I won a pair of binoculars in the Oklahoma City Zoo Photography Contest. I was like, perfect. And because I hadn't looked at birds through binoculars yet, even as a beginning birder. I did not know anything about Audubon societies, which in the long run was a help because I was forced to learn everything on my own. And no digital cameras. I really was pressured and forced to study and memorize field guides. So I'm a birder and a bird photographer. I live in both worlds. I enjoy both worlds. There are times where I don't have my cameras with me, sometimes to my regret. But that is a fact on that. And I see in the comments a lot that people have put up photographing in low light. I see that on quite a few of your comments. I'll talk about understanding some of that as an additional topic at the end to help you with that. So having said that, I'm going to share my screen because looking at my pictures is much better than looking at me. Some of us are much better behind a camera than in front of it. So having said that, I'm going to share my screen with you. And we'll jump right into my presentation today. Okay. All right. Everybody see my, Luke, can you see my?
Looks great.
Great. Okay. Thank you. Okay. So indeed, the top 10 ways to make your photography worse. I'm very fortunate. He said earlier that I do live in the Davis Mountains. The picture on the right is my home with the Milky Way in September when the Milky Way is vertical. If I have a new moon, and I turn off all the lights in my house, I cannot see to walk around. I really need to turn on some kind of a light to see. The other picture there on the left is the view off the west side of my deck. Mount Livermore, the highest peak in the Davis Mountains, is off in that image. Looking out while I'm talking to you right now, if I look out to the right, I can see the McDonald Observatory across the way. I get great birds in my yard. When I came up to look at the house, I heard black-chinned sparrow, hepatic tanager, Scott's oriole, and then I get, pretty good numbers of hummingbirds and species up here. So very blessed to get to live where I live. And I'm partially off grid, but I do get electric and internet, which are the 2 important parts for running a business. So water I get delivered and I have a composting toilets and stuff. So very fortunate to get to live up here. All right. So are y'all ready to learn the first habit on how to make your photography worse? And if you haven't figured out, I'm a major smart aleck, and that's the nice way of putting it. So here we go. Number 1, make sure to always take an image in the exact same position. there is a position that is developed that I call the iPhone position. Okay. Many of you, when you get your camera out, you immediately set your tripod to its maximum length or whatever length fits you while you're standing up, right? Or you hold your camera standing up all the time. And that is a great way to make sure that your images are generally very boring. If you want to continue to have crappy photography, whatever you do, take all your pictures from the same position, because what you're doing is simply providing an image that the brain already expects. And images that the brain already expects are boring for the most part, unless you have some spectacular action or unique landscape that's working for you in other ways. Now, having said that, I know that a lot of us birders and bird watchers, listen, my beard is getting more gray, not more reddish brown. Let's be honest, right? And I know that for some people, I kneel, I lay down, I point up, I crawl, I get in dirt, I get in mud. If you say, gosh, as I get older, it gets harder, then do it more so it's not as hard, and to help keep your health up, and do it to improve your photography. You know, and don't be afraid if you're on a workshop or with a group of people. I'm always happy to help someone back up or to help them down for an image. Don't let your pride keep your photography from getting better. For all crying out loud, I never go, oh, they need to help up. Number one, it's just smart, because who wants to bust your good camera gear, or who wants to bust your neck or your knee, right? So, but if you want to make your photography worse, you must master this pose, whether it's with an iPhone or with a camera. Whatever you do, always put your tripod at the same position, put your camera, shoot at the same millimeter range, whatever it is, don't change it, because that's how you can make your photography worse. Now, Costa Rica, I was with a group of folks, this beautiful flowering bush nearby covered with ants. And I knew immediately, because the bush was lower, I needed to kneel down. And one lady goes, oh, watch out, it's muddy. And I thought, oh, she doesn't know me very well, does she? Look, nobody on here we're never setting fashion trends when we're out photographing or birding, right? Nobody's taking pictures of us to put in a magazine so people can see the clothes we're wearing. So who cares if it's muddy? Then buy clothes you don't care getting muddy, or get dirty knees on your jeans, or, you know, whatever it is. Kneel down, like in this case, I knelt down because these ants were moving rapidly, and I found a spot and waited for one to come and get still, and it struck a great pose. But had I been standing up, that image would have been very boring. A top-down shot of that ant, that's what the brain would have expected. The brain doesn't expect for us to be in the world of this ant. And by changing our position, we enter the world of whatever it is we're photographing, making our images much more vibrant, much more exciting, and drawing the viewer into our images. In the example here of this ant, on the Galapagos Islands during a photography workshop, I laid down on the beach. Now, I'm gonna be honest. I don't like beaches. I find beaches in general very boring unless there's a lot of wildlife on them, because all beaches look the same. There's some sand and there's some water. Some water's clear, some water's dirtier. So if there's great wildlife in the water, that gets my interest. But beaches to me are very boring. If I flat horizon, yawn. Okay. People go, oh, great sunsets. I'm like, dude, come see some West Texas sunsets. Your beach sunset is stunk. Okay. So I'm one of those who don't like it. I don't like sand in places where it doesn't belong. And believe me, that white sand there on that beach, it gets in places it doesn't belong. But to get the shot I want, I'll lay down on wet sand. I will do it. So by laying down, we know the birds are a lot calmer in the Galapagos Islands, a lot tamer. I was able to lay down and enter the world of this little warbler in a way that we don't normally expect. He's on the ground, he's on the beach. And by getting down low, I was able to get into his world instead of trying to photograph it. Again, if I put I don't use a tripod very much anymore with Olympus. I'll talk about that. But it would have been a boring angled down shot that wouldn't have stood out. My wife surprised me last year, or I guess it was this year. God, COVID has really changed the time on us, hasn't it? This year, she took me to the Hill Country Elephant Preserve. And frankly, when you're photographing an elephant's eye and you're standing a foot away, you only have one position to photograph its face, and that is up, unless maybe you're Shaquille O'Neal or someone. But by looking up and getting the clouds in the eye, it's a much more intimate shot of an elephant than we're normally used to. Again, I wouldn't normally recommend being a foot from an elephant unless it's in a situation like this. But you know, I really felt like this image, you know, sometimes looking up can be a little awkward in different ways, but with the way the eye was looking at me, I just knew, like, you actually get to, that you know this elephant by looking into its eye from this position. And then having the clouds behind it, we stress the height of this beautiful elephant. On the Costa Rica photography workshop through WILDSIDE, this beautiful big-headed anole blending in so well with the lichens on the tree behind. He's in this wonderful position that he held for a long time. And there was our group and another group at this one location. And as far as I know, I'm the only one who actually knelt down to get eye level with this lizard. Yes, there were rocks. Yes, it was a little uncomfortable. But tip, go to Home Depot or Lowe's or, you know, whichever one you like. Do not buy knee pads in the gardening section. Go to the construction section and find the knee pads that the guys and ladies who do mortar work or concrete work or whatever use. Those are much better. They're gel. They last longer. They'll hold up in a variety of climates. Get you some knee pads. You go, well, won't I look goofy wearing knee pads around? Let me take a picture of you wherever you're birding and photographing without knee pads. You're not going to look much more goofy than you already do. Just understand that. Our hat, our clothes, our equipment. Don't be worried about how goofy you look. I assure you, you look goofy. So now look goofy and be productive. That's what I say. And I wanted this image because, man, I wanted to look right into his eyes. I wanted you to feel like you were perched on the tree beside this big-headed anole. Let's see, I talked about the knee pads, where to get them. But again, if you want to make sure your photography gets worse, you keep shooting in the same position, sit at the same level. The volleyball players, where that's a good tip, Henry. Volleyball player knee pads fit under your pants. Yeah, there you go. Never ever read. Actually, I just saw a pair of hunting pants too. Sorry, a little diversion at a local hunting store where the knee pads were built into the pants. I was like, oh, I might have to grab a pair of those too. So then they're with me all the time. The second habit to develop, if you want to make your photography worse, is never ever read your camera's manual. Whatever you do, don't open that because it's highly informative and instructional, and you might actually learn what that multi-$1,000 piece of gear does. This blows me away, and I know a lot of people always assume that men don't read manuals. That is not true. I'm a manual reader. In fact, so I have 4 different Olympus camera bodies, model numbers. I have 6 total, and like for my Olympus EM1X, the pro wildlife sports, you know, body, I've read through that manual 3 to 4 times. The Olympus OM3 twice, the Mark II 3 times, and the newest one doesn't have a manual yet that I've got or downloaded. I'll be reading through that multiple times. If you want your photography to stay worse, what you want to do is make sure you don't learn what the tool you bought does. You know, you can go buy a $100 hammer, but if you hold the hammer by the head, you're not driving in a nail any better than a $1 hammer because you simply aren't using the tool to its fullest potential. In the same way, if you do not understand what your camera does in all of its functions and features, which button does what, which dial does what, how do I move an autofocus point, how do I change my shutter speed, if that isn't second nature to you, particularly with bird photography, you are going to make your photography worse. Why spend all this money and assume the camera is smart? I'm going to give you a news flash. Your camera, no matter how expensive it was, no matter what brand it was, your camera in the majority of lighting circumstances is dumb. Your camera is dumb in most lighting circumstances, okay? You need to understand you are way smarter than your camera. You just don't know it yet. But until you learn what your camera does, you don't know how to be smarter than your camera, okay? For example, on a Costa Rica photography workshop, here's a bat that was perched in a little termite nest that was in a tree about 3-4 feet off the ground at most, right? Had to lay in mud on my back, holding a flashlight for light, and then working my camera with the other hand. If I did not already know how to change everything without having to take my eye away from the camera, it would have made this image much harder because just trying to get the flashlight and the angle of the camera for the photo was challenging enough laying on your back. But and I can't tell you how many of our clients laid down and then started well, and they'd have to look at the back and fiddle around and, oh, it's already a tough image to acquire. It's much tougher when you don't know what your gear does. So All of your camera manuals should be downloaded on your smartphone, your iPad, whatever goes with you to photograph. They should be with you, not so that you can read it when you need it in the field, but so that you may need to reference it. But while you're at home, before you've spent hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of dollars to go somewhere, learn what your equipment does before you get there. Okay. Here's another example on the Galapagos Islands during our Galapagos photo and birding adventure. Many of you probably know that marine iguanas, you know, when they forage under the ocean, they ingest too much salt. So to eliminate the excess salt, they simply at times just sneeze it out their nose, right? Very cool. Now with virtually every camera system out there to try to capture this, you would just have to get focused on and start taking pictures, right? Just and fill and take hundreds and hundreds, if not more, and you're probably not likely to catch it. This is where Olympus comes in and kicks some tail. It has a pro capture mode. Now, by reading my manual before I ever got there, I knew what I was going to use. I put it in pro capture mode, which does up to 60 frames per second. If I half press the shutter button, I knew that my camera recorded 25 images in buffer, not to my card, but in buffer. And then when I saw action I wanted to capture, which this is too fast for your eye to activate the shutter before it happens. You're not that fast, okay? Unless you're a superhero, and then I'd like to meet you. So I half press the shutter, so I'm recording 25 images in buffer. I see the salt come out. I press the shutter. It records the prior 25 images, plus at 60 frames per second, however long I hold the button down. Okay. Now those, once I fully press it, I've already missed the action. It's the prior images where I capture the action. Twice within 5 minutes, I captured 4 shots of the salt coming out of the nose. I only could do that because I knew what my camera did before I got there. If I'd have been fiddle farting around with an owner's manual, well, I would have even had time to sit there, because you only have so much time at a spot in the Galapagos to do things, right? So by knowing what my camera did, I was able to capture a cool shot like this salt being ejected from this marine iguana's nose, or a butterfly perched on a flower and then taking off, or a bird sitting on a perch and waiting for it to take off. I knew that my camera does live composite mode. This is taken off my deck out here looking at the McDonald Observatory. I wanted to see how live composite worked on star trails. Because I'd already read the manual, I knew go take a base exposure, look at it, set up live composite. I knew it would photograph for 3 hours at max. And so I set my base exposure. I put my camera on the tripod. I went to bed, woke up the next morning, went out and got my camera, downloaded my live composite star trail image, all because I knew what my camera did. A lot of people have Olympus go, oh, what's live composite mode? And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is a spectacular feature, but I know it because I've read the manual 3 or 4 times. Interval mode. Again, if you're going to shoot intervals, which you guys listen, from here to Southeast Arizona, we get some of the best monsoon and storms to photograph for intervals. I mean, yeah, there's some cool storms out on the plains, but you get some great storms, but you have oftentimes some fairly boring, let's face it, cornfields in the foreground. Whereas between the Sky Islands here and there, we got some awesome storm photography, right? So I'm going to show you interval mode. I knew how many images to take for however long a video, and I'm going to swap over to a video real quick of this interval. Did the video swap over for y'all, Luke?
No, I haven't seen the video.
Okay, I probably have to go to share.
You may have to go to share a different screen.
Let's see here. New share. That's right. You are correct.
Yeah.
QuickTime Player share. All right. Is it showing up now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, here we go. That's not video. That is a series of images that I took, and then you put them together to create a video. But you can see the beautiful evolution of this storm, the God rays, as it passes over the northwest corner of Big Bend National Park. But because I knew what my camera did, I wasn't having to read the manual or fiddle around with it. I saw this happening. I was able to hop out, put my camera on a little tripod on the hood of my car, and capture this time interval sequence. So that's why I think it's so important for us to get to, let me get back to my presentation for you. So that's a simple example right there, guys, of how knowing what your camera does will help you. The third habit to develop on making sure your image, your photography gets worse, is be sure and ignore the edges of your image when composing. Whatever you do, don't look at the corners. Now I'm going to pick on myself and share with you some images where I myself forgot to check all 4 corners. And sometimes, and I've trained myself to do that on virtually every image. And just every now and then, though, brain fart, you know, or you just don't think to look, or something's happening quickly. This rotor ran literally almost right through my legs, right in front of me. And I real quick just wanted to try to capture an image, but I did not. You'll notice in the upper left, that's a shadow from a picnic table here in Big Bend National Park that I just simply missed. I didn't pay close enough attention. I could have reframed. I could have probably taken a step to the left while he was sunbathing there. Can you see a difference in these 2 images? Who could see a difference here in the you know, these 2 images? If you see a difference, type it up over here in the left in the comments. Anyone? Upper left, yeah. Upper right, darks, yeah. The right here, yep. Upper right, that's right. Whoops, hold on. Oh, I clicked. Yeah, you can see this little black shadow right there. Now I removed it in post processing. It would have been better for me. Now, once I saw that in my image, once I looked at the back of my camera, I went out, got that rock, and moved it so I didn't have that shadow there. But you notice it's a distraction in the original image. Normally, I will take my camera and kind of look around for things like that. This was shot from a blind. So once I'm looking for those kind of things, it's just a distraction in the original image, okay? Can you see a difference on this one? This one's pretty easy, isn't it? I was at the Space Coast Birding Festival in Florida, and I see these beautiful reflections and a common gallinule coming across. And so I just kneeled down. I kneeled down to get the image. And I mean, I'll be darned if there's not a bush coming into the left side, but I was so focused on getting my autofocus point on the eye of the bird that I ignored the bottom left where that little bush jumped into my image. Obviously I fix it in post-processing, but as much as possible, I want my image to be as close to perfect coming out of camera as possible, as close to it as I can get it. All right, what about this image? What do you notice? And I'll tell you that my client in the upper right, I wanted in the picture. I wanted my client in the picture. Bottom left, yep, there you go. So this is an 8mm fisheye lens. It has a very wide field of view. And I'm up on top of the Rio Grande overlook. That's the little nature trail right there. And if you will look in the lower left, you can actually see a part of my shirt sticking out into the image. I'm hand holding this image, and I'll be darned if I did not get a part of my shirt. There's a 4mm fisheye that is so wide that you can put on the Olympus. If you're holding your camera, your finger will be in the image. It's that wide of a lens. So you really need to watch all 4 corners. Now, obviously, birds in flight, fast moving birds, you can't always do that. But to the extent possible, particularly if you're at blinds or, you know, maybe you're shooting at feeders or whatever, and you want to try to keep the feeder out of the picture, pay attention to the 4 corners. Because if you want your photography to get worse, just ignore what might be sticking into your image. Okay. So the 4th habit on how to make your photography worse, only take a couple of shots of each subject or scene. Now, I'll often hear this, boy, you take a lot of pictures. I sure do. I take lots. I'm 300,000 images just behind in editing. 300,000 images behind. But the reason I take a lot is because I don't know what action is going to occur when. And if you think about it, let's say I'm shooting at 1/1000th of a second shutter speed. I am capturing such a small sliver of time that I might very well miss what I'm actually going after. This first image is a good example. This is the Amazon Riverboat Cruise photography workshop. We're in a skiff with 12 other photographers on a small tributary on the Amazon River, on the Marañón, actually one of the main rivers that forms the Amazon. I kept my ISO a little lower, so I only had 1/500th of a second, and I'm shooting at 840 millimeters of lens. So I'm below the typical hand holding rule, what it says to hand hold your camera, okay, for without camera shake. This particular black-faced spider monkey, he hung by one arm, and I took over 400 images for this one pose roughly, because I knew that some are going to be blurry. And I happened to capture him make this face. He did not make this face long. In fact, I'll be honest, I don't even remember seeing it necessarily through the camera. I might have, but I don't remember. And he made that great face, caught it, and it happened to be sharp. Because quite a few of them, because people would move around in the boat, I'm on water, and Olympus's image stabilization is second to none. I mean, it's spectacular. So the reality is, though, I took 400 images, and this is one I entered in the NAMPA, the North American Nature Photography Association showcase for this year, just because I love that facial pose. You were talking about the hummingbirds. Several of y'all brought out the challenge of hummingbird photography. Well, I shoot on natural backgrounds, black and white. Okay. This was my favorite, one of my favorites from 2019. Last year, I took over 15,000 hummingbird images in my yard from mid-July through early September, the peak of hummingbird numbers at my house. And this was one of my favorites. This year, I've probably taken close to 30,000 images just of hummingbirds since July. I've been home a little more because of COVID, doing more of my workshops here. So I love this one. I love the color. That's not photoshopped in the sense of I didn't put a black background against a natural picture. That is how I took the shot, exactly as you see it. I did not, stick in a black background. I shot it with a black background. So why do I take, and I had one client out here, and I tell him, don't be shy. And he's like, click, click, click. I'm like, oh, dear Lord. Do you understand how fast hummers are? Because you might take a picture when you think the hummingbird's in there, and you look at the back of the camera and you go, well, where'd the hummingbird go? Brother, he beat you. He too fast. She got out of the frame before you could capture. So I take tons of images because I'm very particular about the poses of hummingbirds that I like, or the body language, or whatever it might be. So that was one of my favorites in showing the detail and the colors and whatnot from last year. I do summer storms and starry skies photography workshops out here in Big Bend. And I had my camera on a tripod and was just I wasn't using live composite. I had a bunch of other photographers who didn't have that feature. So I was showing them how to capture the lightning using other means, in this case, a slow shutter speed. Debbie, I see your question about how did I capture the detail for the hummingbird. I will come back and answer that. Luke, make sure to remind me at the end about hummingbird photography and the backgrounds and stuff, and the storage system question, okay? Be sure and prompt me about those. Thank you, sir. So one of over 600 images, and now I'm at 18 millimeters. That lightning's basically coming over my head where I'm photographing, and lightning doesn't drive me away. I will take the risk for getting great shots. But over 600 images that evening, doing it without live composite. With live composite, I would have captured lightning with probably 5 shots. I would have gotten phenomenal shots, but I was doing it how other camera systems like Canon, Nikon, all the others would have to do it. So 600 images that night to capture this beautiful lightning scene. I was doing a winter raptor photography workshop out here with a client, and most of you that know pronghorn know they don't generally just randomly run at you. Normally they run away from you. And we had stopped along a road for this pronghorn, and he was all juiced up, real hyper. And he starts running towards us, and I'm shooting, and I see my client take a couple of shots and put his camera down, and I went, just shoot, just shoot, just shoot. I say that a lot at times with people, just shoot. Now's not the time to fiddle fart around, just shoot. Oh, okay, because some of my images, the paws were clipped or the hooves were clipped, the head was clipped, or autofocus might have locked onto the chest instead of the face. Just shoot. 63 images, and this one was my favorite because it had the whole body. The eyes were sharp, not just the chest. Nice background. You've got nice movement. It's so easy to delete digital images, guys. So easy. And someone had asked about, man, it's amazing we got good shots with film image. Look, when you see phenomenal film wildlife images, yes, you go, wow. I mean, I got some great ones back in the day, and yeah, it's a totally different world for us right now. So it is important that you not get shy when it comes to taking images, particularly of birds. They change posture so quickly. Or if the autofocus point, I'll talk about that on another point. All right, guys, the fifth habit on how to make your photography worse is whatever you do, don't take a photography class, a workshop, or go out with a pro. Don't spend that money. I know it's a lot of money, but whatever you do, don't do that if you want your photography to get worse, okay? So to make your photography worse, just always photograph by yourself doing the exact same things you've always known. Never push yourself, okay? Here's an example. One of my favorite images from, oh, there's a weird red line on my screen. That's not good. There's a glass frog in this image, and it looks like it was taken at night in this wonderful jungle. And I am in the jungle, but I'm in a parking lot with this leaf attached to a tripod, and there are cars about 30 feet away. Now, I knew how to create a black background without using any material by controlling my light. And I was teaching our clients, and people get so excited, they just start shooting. And some of them, you could see the cars, you could see buildings. And I was trying to teach them, look, and over time they were like, oh, okay, if I do this and I do that, then you get a much more naturalistic looking picture without cars in the background. And you know, people had spent a lot of money going to this workshop, and they get excited. You know, when we get to the Galapagos Islands, the first morning when people get out, we don't even try to teach. It was, oh, good. That wouldn't, I was afraid something was happening on my screen. Thanks, Luke. You know, when you first get to Galapagos, we just let people go shoot for 20 minutes because you have no hope of teaching them anything in the first 20 minutes on the first island. But then it's like, all right, guys, let's rein it in. Now let's help you start getting some great shots, you know, or help improve your shots. So I was one growing up, and in my 20s and 30s, I thought, I don't need to spend money on anybody. I can do it all myself, and I'm wired that way. You know what? As I've gotten older, wiser, and smarter, and perhaps made more money, no, it is worth hiring people. For my 50th birthday, you know what I did? My friends, John and Kendra Abbott, who are like the dragonfly guru, you know, John does a field guide to damselflies, dragonflies of the Southwest and of Texas, and they're updating the Peterson insect field guide. For my 50th birthday, I got myself a trip where I wasn't teaching. Yes, I could have taught a lot of things, but I went as a participant to one of their bug shot workshops. That was for me. I wanted to learn. I wanted to hear what other people had to say. Not that I can't learn when I'm teaching a workshop, but I didn't want to be responsible. That was my gift to myself. I love looking at portrait photographers' work, not because I'm necessarily like all engaged by portrait work. I don't shoot portraits normally, but I can learn from their lighting, because oftentimes a great portrait photographer, you feel like you know the subject, even if you've never met. And so I'm like, okay, I want to learn their lighting, how they use shadows, how do they pose people? What is it about that angle of their shot? How do they make people come alive? You know, food photographers, still life, things I don't normally shoot. What can I learn from them about and apply it to wildlife photography? Big Bend National Park. Big Bend is a huge national park, 880,000 acres, okay? There's only about 3 or 4 main paved roads. The rest is dirt. And so many people want to come out here and bird. And 90% of the habitat is fairly similar. You don't want to waste your time there. And if you're going to do photography, this morning the guy had signed up for a bird photography workshop. But a couple of years ago was the best Big Bend bluebonnet bloom in my 30 years of going to Big Bend. I mean, the Big Bend bluebonnet is not like a typical lupine. They grow up to 4 feet tall. They can get huge. And they were only blooming in a couple areas. And he said, hey, I've heard the bluebonnets are good. I'd like to do those. I said, okay, I know the spot to stop on the way down. Now, he had not been to the park. He would have piddled around looking and probably not got to this spot at the right time. Would he have even known what time of year those bloom? Because most people think bluebonnets in Texas, late March, early April. Big Bend bluebonnets are done blooming by March, usually. They start in late December. He didn't know how to balance the sky and the foreground. You know, how do you emphasize sun's rays? What do you need to do for that? But by hiring me, he had all that information at his fingertips because he hired me. He wouldn't have got this shot out there on his own. So it's worth having a guide, whether you're birding, bird photography, you know, for a local area, because they've spent the gas, they've spent the time, the investment. You know, it's kind of frustrating. I get people calling me, they don't want to hire me, but they want me to tell them all the things to go do. And you're kind of like, well, you know, I've spent I put 40,000 miles on my brand new truck that I bought last November already. That's a lot of gas. That's a lot of time, a lot of energy. We put in the time learning and doing all that to teach you. Here's one of the summer storms and starry skies photo workshop. Number one, this is at Santa Elena Canyon in the middle of the night. How many of y'all would want to go there by yourself? My wife can't believe the places I go in the middle of the night out here by myself. Would you know how to balance the headlamp and the base exposure of the night sky? We were waiting for the Milky Way to move right over the middle of the canyon. You can see the galactic center starting to appear on the left side of the image there. But would you have even gone down there in the middle of the night by yourself? Okay. I don't know. You may not. Here's one of my favorite shots from the Amazon Riverboat Cruise workshop. And again, I don't normally photograph people, but I look back in the skiff as we were heading back to the main boat, to the riverboat, and I saw the sunset colors, and I saw the boat driver in the back there, and one of our participants, and I had an idea for a shot, handed a flashlight to one of the participants. I said, hold it at this angle, and I'm going to capture a light of one of our participants. He was wearing a WILDSIDE shirt. Turned out to be one of my favorite images of the whole trip. But would you know how to balance the ambient light and the artificial light? How would you make sure you had the sunset as well as the enough detail in the participant there? So how would you do that in a moving boat? The boat was moving. So that's the kind of thing that it's worth hiring someone or going with someone to an area. Yes, you're going to spend more money, but yes, you're going to get more out of it. On this trip, we had not one, but two different family groups of owl monkeys. You know, it was incredible with young both times. So it pays a lot to go on a group like that. All right, the sixth habit to develop to make your photography worse is whatever you do, don't develop your own style. Make sure to imitate the style of other photographers. Whatever you do, don't develop your own style. And by that, I mean, like, here's a typical bird shot that a lot of people love. Nice, clean bokeh. Bokeh is the background that is creamy or greens, browns, beautiful colors that are out of focus that really help the bird stand out. And I love this shot. This is a common nighthawk perched on a dead cholla stump out on the Marfa, Texas grasslands. And I find that everybody wants these nice creamy bokeh shots. And believe me, I've got blind in the back porch and one out front, and I want that. And I know Arthur Morse and some other photographers kind of began to popularize that style in a lot of ways, but there's other ways to photograph birds in their environment. There are some birds that are always in busy settings, like LeConte sparrows. I'm a sparrow freak. I love sparrows. It's hard to get a nice creamy bokeh with LeConte sparrow. You can do it sometimes, but it feels more right when they're in a busy, grassy area, So don't think that this is the only way to photograph birds. This is not the only style. I, for one, love black and white wildlife photography. Very few people ever convert to black and white. As soon as I often know an image is going to be black and white before I press the shutter button, okay? I often know that. In this case, walked along Isla Genovesa, and I see the Galapagos sea lion's laying on his side, and his whiskers are coming up. I see the dark background. I thought, and for those of you that understand sea lions, you know that their whiskers are everything. It's how they find prey. It's how they maneuver through tight spots. Those whiskers feed them. It's like they're Google, constantly feeding them information, right? So I wanted the focus to be on the whiskers. So I knew black and white would eliminate the color, which there wasn't a ton of in this image to begin with, but color is oftentimes a distraction more so than contributing to the image. Okay, color can be a distraction. Color is a distraction a lot of times when it comes to emotion, and a lot of times when it comes to texture. Color can be a distraction. So I think I just almost bit the tip of my tongue off right there. So I knew this image I want to convert to black and white, and I don't care if anybody else likes it. I do, and that's what's important. And if you enjoy it too, I hope so. Okay. I love shooting long lens panoramic images. Again, I know this isn't bird related, but here's the key. Not a lot of people do this. A lot of it's because they use front button focus, and it makes it a royal pain in the rear to do it, or they think they need a lot of expensive gear. This was handheld. One of the things as a young photographer is when I would be in grandiose scenes, and we got grandiose scenes in Big Bend, you got Yellowstone, Grand Teton, several parts out there in the Sky Islands, Grand Canyon, lots of big, gorgeous vistas. and our mind says, "Ooh, look at this big area. I need a wide angle lens." You take a picture, and then you have these little tiny little kind of pissant mountains, right? Little bitty pathetic things. You're like, "Ah, that doesn't look anything like where I was standing." No, because a wide angle lens reduces the size of everything. So I found that if I take a long lens and take a bunch of pictures and stitch them together, I capture that whole scene, but I don't diminish the size of the features in front of me, and it brings the viewer into my image. It's like they're standing right there, not like the mountains are 500 miles off. Okay. This is one of my styles, long lens panoramics. I do it all the time because of that. So, again, I don't care if other people like long lens panoramics. That's what I like to do. I told you earlier about white or black backgrounds. Ironically enough, a lot of my birder friends don't like the hummingbird shots on white or black backgrounds. But you know who do? Interior designers. You know who spends a lot of money on pictures? It ain't birders. It's interior designers. So I love white backgrounds. First, because I read about the meet your neighbor style of photography. And by having a white background and even the black, we're focused on this particular individual bird, not it as a species. The bokeh background, that's kind of your field guide photo, right? This is different than a field guide photo. This is more focused on this female calliope, not on the calliope as a species. But, she dipped down. I love her eyes looking at us, the head pose and all that. But I also shoot the white background because an interior designer will buy that. A birder's never going to spend $800 for a 2 foot by 2 foot acrylic of that, right? All right, the seventh, how many images were stitched together, Henry? For this one, it was 22. 22 images I stitched together to create that picture. So the seventh habit we want to develop to make our photography worse is whatever you do, don't worry about your shutter speed or using a tripod or any other form of stability, because we know all of y'all are strong enough to handhold those long lenses just fine, okay? Just fine. I'm going to tell you something. A blurry picture is always a crappy picture unless it's an intentional blur. And I don't see unintentional blurs that I often like, okay? And I'm not talking about the tips of birds' wings. I'm talking about when the whole image has shake to it from too slow a shutter speed or camera movement. It just doesn't look good. I don't care how rare the bird is. And I know your family and friends on Facebook will go, "Oh my gosh, that's awesome." Yeah, it sucks. I'm telling you, I don't care what they say. My wife knows if she asks me how she looks in a dress, she's finding out how she looks in that dress. I'm not gonna lie. I'm bluntly honest to a lot of ways. That image, it just stinks. It's just terrible. So what kind of things can we do to increase the stability of our camera or make sure we have a high enough shutter speed so our images don't stink? All right. For example, here's a Christmas image taken on the square in Georgetown, Texas, live bulb mode, where you expose the image for as long as you want. And in the Olympus camera, it will show you as it develops. But I knew it was going to go for a while. So at 7.2 seconds, I put it on a tripod. I knew that if I wanted that to be a sharp image, it had to be on a tripod. Now, before I shifted from Canon to Olympus, I shot on a tripod 95% of the time, whether it be bird photography, landscape, night sky, macro, whatever. 95% of the time I was shooting from a tripod. Olympus now, it's reversed. 5% of my time is on tripod. But don't think you can go do that with any other camera system because their image stabilization is not as good, at least yet, not as good. So there are some certain situations where you can handhold, and I'll talk about those here in a minute. Again, long lens panoramic, 1/13 of a second. I was on a winter raptor photography workshop, so I wasn't planning on doing a landscape, but I loved the scene in front of us. And I didn't bring a tripod because I was going to be shooting out of my truck. So I used a fence post. I put my camera on a fence post and just rotated it around to get all the images I needed. That's a 21 image panoramic. But I used a fence post. I took advantage of what I had nearby to add stability since I was at 1/13 of a second. Here, a turtle-headed ant was walking on this tree trunk. So I had a Olympus camera with a macro flash on top, or I'm sorry, out to the side. And I leaned against the tree trunk, praying there was no bullet ant under me, and trying to get this shot of this turtle-headed ant as it walked around on the stump. So I used a tree to help provide a little more stability. even though my shutter speed was more than fast enough. I just want my image as sharp as possible. In a macro, that can be really challenging. This is an image using live neutral density feature on the Olympus cameras, where I don't have to screw a neutral density filter on the end. And what a neutral density filter does is it darkens it's a dark filter, so it reduces the amount of light, allowing you to use a longer shutter speed so that you can blur things like a waterfall. But Box Canyon Falls in Ouray, Colorado, the walkway, you can't really put a tripod on. So I went and got my camera, and well, I had my camera, I should say. Oops, I broke my camera here the other day. So the proper technique for hand holding a camera body is not the bloody iPhone pose. You're not holding anything steady like this, okay? Unless you're built like me, I'm Scottish. We don't run marathons, we throw telephone poles for competition, okay? We're built like mules. I can hand hold this steady here. Odds are you can't, okay? And if you can, rock them, but odds are you can't. So pull the camera into, I wear spectacles normally. It helps with my distance visions. I often pull my camera so tight into my forehead that I'll push my glasses right up against my eye, because the more the camera becomes one with me, the more stable and steady I am. Don't chicken wing it, okay? No chicken wing photography. Elbows in as tight as possible. One hand tight on the grip, the other hand underneath, okay? And we're gonna hold it like this. We're going to hold it as steady as possible and take that picture. 2.5 second image, handheld, and I assure you that image is tack sharp because I use proper hand holding technique. Okay, so don't if you're out there with a 600mm lens trying to photograph birds, I see ladies and men all the time pick that thing up. I'm strong enough to use a 600 handheld, a Canon for a little bit. But most of the time, you know what? No, it needs to be on a tripod. So the reality is you have got to take those kind of things into consideration. All right. The 8th habit. Oh, how is digital? Paula, how is digital neutral density filter different than other settings? Well, oftentimes you have too much light. So you couldn't get to 1/13 of a second shutter speed, even if you reduce your ISO all the way and you have f/16, f/22, you still have too much light. So a neutral density filter reduces the amount of light so you can use slower shutter speeds. Oh, what is the camera doing inside of it? It's magic. It's absolute magic. I truly don't know what the camera does. It is magic, and it's worth it because I'm not having to carry other filters. I don't know how they do it. It's brilliant. Smarter minds than mine figured that out. That is a question for an Olympus designer, someone much more sharp than I, at least in mathematics and physics. All right. Yeah, that question makes me nuts. Yeah, it makes me nuts too, because I'd love to know, but it's magic. So the 8th habit to develop, sorry if you can hear my Japanese silky rooster going out there. I apologize for that. We hear you, buddy. Never move your autofocus point or change your autofocus mode, okay? Never move your autofocus point or change your autofocus mode. That way, all your pictures will remain centered and the focus will be on whatever's right in the very middle regardless. How many of you don't take the time to move your autofocus point? You're always on that center spot, and it has never moved since the day you bought your camera. You see this wonderful little joystick on the back here? I don't know if my camera will focus on or not because I have it on facial recognition right now. That joystick makes all the difference in the world. Now, some cameras use a directional pad to change your autofocus point. And, oh gosh, that rooster. I don't know why. He must hear me talking. So in this image of this juvenile red-footed booby, if I left the autofocus point right in the center, it would grab the tip of the bill and the eyes would be out of focus. Now, this is a centered image, and I wanted it centered because of the symmetry on the bird's face. You know, it's kind of a comical looking bird. He looks cross-eyed, looking right down at me. And on the Galapagos, you know, within 6 feet, this bird's bill is pretty good size, right? So I moved my autofocus point, and I am constantly moving it. It almost never stays still when I'm photographing birds and wildlife. So I moved my autofocus point over a few to lock right on the eye because I wanted the eye and a little bit of the face in focus, but I wanted the bill blurry. So I used appropriate aperture or f-stop to do that. but had I not moved my autofocus point, it would have grabbed the tip of the bill, or I'd have had to move my camera over and it would have been centered. But one way to make sure that you can master bird photography is learn how to move those autofocus points quickly. Another shot was from my Capture the Hummingbird workshops. This is another black background. I did not Photoshop the bee into the image. The bee was on the feeder, the black chin flew up, and the bee came off and tried this image. He's trying to sting the hummingbird, which may very well be fatal to a hummingbird. I would imagine. Well, I had two images where the bee and the hummer are in the same focal plane. Okay. If you use the same autofocus mode all the time, or configuration, I should say, you're going to struggle. For instance, on my cameras, on all my Olympus cameras, there's a lever right here at the back called the FN lever. I have the position 1 set to single point starting out in the middle. Now I move it all over. Position 2, when I flip the switch, it changes to the 3x3, 9 points, which is what I use for birds in flight and hummingbirds. Okay. I'm pretty good at autofocus, and I can often get a single point on a hummingbird, but it's a lot easier when you're doing it with 9. Okay. I never use the full screen unless I've got a bird in flight with no background, because all the focus points are probably going to grab a limb or a branch or something else. Okay. Unless you're using Olympus's focus limiter, which is wonderful when you're at blinds, but that's another topic for another day. So I captured this because my autofocus points were correct for this type of photography. Okay. And again, part luck too. Here's another image. This is a Galapagos, one of the Santa Cruz Island giant tortoises. I wanted his head slightly off centered, and I'm down in the mud. I'm not quite in the water, but I'm down low in mud. And if I'd been using this, if I had the point centered, I would have centered his head, which would not have looked as good in this image. I wanted the light was coming left to right. And you notice how the light is hitting his head, but the back, his shoulders and his legs are in shadow. And I wanted to emphasize that in black and white. So I moved my autofocus point using the joystick, a couple of pushes to the right, so I could get it right on the eye, because the eye is the most important part of that image, this particular image, and most wildlife photography, wanting it sharp. So I moved it a couple of points, and I didn't have to recompose my image. I was ready to take the image right where I wanted. What is MC -14? That is the 1.4 teleextender. So it takes my 300 to a 420 millimeter, but because the crop factor of an Olympus body, it makes it a 840 millimeters equivalent. Okay. From a distance, is moving autofocus points that different than focus and recompose? Well, if you're recomposing, then you're obviously shooting in single shot autofocus, which is horrible for wildlife. So I use rear button focus. I'll be honest, I'm going to get on my soapbox. I do not know why camera companies still put focus on the shutter button. They're two separate functions. I always use rear button focus. I don't even comprehend why anybody uses front button focus for wildlife or landscape anymore. It makes no sense to me. Other people do, rock on, great, but there's so many advantages to it. Like when I'm doing my long lens panoramic, I can focus once, let go, and every time I press the shutter button, it's not refocusing. I don't have to shift to manual mode. It's wonderful. So for me, rear button focus, and all I'm doing is moving the focal point, press, hold it down on the eye, or let go, whatever, if the animal's not moving. And as we all know, these tortoises aren't setting wind sprint records. So move my autofocus point, click, take the picture. I don't want to focus and then recompose unless it's something that's sitting much more still. But with rear button focus, I'm basically I can do single autofocus or continuous all the time with rear button focus. We had a weird day on the Peruvian coast with a real hazy morning. And so it created this kind of a funky gray. This has not been converted to black and white. This is a color image. And I'm not kidding you. It's not black and white. It appears such because of the haze and the angle. The sun is behind the birds. And I knew skimmers were going to be chasing each other. They're as grumpy almost as hummingbirds, right? And so I kept my 9-point autofocus because I knew getting single point, and I knew I wanted a head to, I'm shooting vertically. And so I wanted the heads to the right. So I moved my 9 off center a little bit to the right to help make sure. But then I got lucky and had 2 skimmers chasing each other and just happened to capture when the bill was open by taking a lot of pictures. I probably took 300 to 400 of these guys, you know, whipping around chasing each other. And this was my favorite. All right. The 9th habit on how to make your photography worse is whatever you do, ignore post-processing. You don't need it. And an answer to one question was I use Lightroom for editing. I started to learn Capture One because it's better with Olympus RAW files, but its organization is very weak in my opinion. So I use Lightroom. I use Photo Mechanic for initial sorting. And Photo Mechanic is much quicker than Lightroom. Then I pull in what images I want in the Lightroom. I also use Topaz Gigapixel, Topaz Sharpen, and Denoise. And I do black and white conversions in Silver Effects Pro. Okay. So post-processing. I'm going to get on a soapbox, ladies and gentlemen. Please don't use the phrase straight out of camera because there is no such thing. And here's why. There is no such thing. Even if you're shooting in JPEG, there's no such thing because your camera is doing processing to a JPEG file. You just don't understand what it's doing. Do you know what color profile is being applied? That's post-processing, but your camera's doing it. And remember what I said a long time ago? You are smarter than your camera. And also, I'm a control freak. I'm a little OCD. I want to control it. I control every aspect of my image to whatever extent possible. Okay. So no, there is no such thing as straight out camera. Either your camera's doing some processing or you're doing it. Now, even if you're shooting in RAW, it may still be applying some processing. You just have a chance to change it. White balance, you know, you've got your color profile, which I shoot custom profiles for all my cameras to apply. So you need to learn how to do post-processing. If you're like, oh, I really don't want to learn how to do that. Photography is going to be a tough hobby if you really want to get to be a great photographer, or even a really good one. It's going to be tough. In this particular image that I have in front of you, most of you probably aren't familiar with tricolored hognose snakes. They're not native to the U.S., but a friend of mine raises them. And they're a snake that is always on the move. They are very hard to photograph. And so he got to the back of the white box I was shooting him in, and you can see the crease in the top picture of the white box. Well, you could say, well, why not reposition him? Oh my gosh, he was still, his head was facing me. And if I even touched him gently, it's going to be 15 minutes before he's sitting still right now. So all I did was apply a little post-processing to get it to white. You'll notice the contrast is better. You know, you'll notice how I cleaned up. That's all in post-processing, and that's normal. You know, I hear a lot of people say, well, that's Photoshop. Well, in what sense do you mean? Because we all do post-processing. Now, if someone takes a moon that wasn't in the picture and sticks it in, that's compositing. You still do that in Photoshop or some other softwares, but you have to apply noise reduction and sharpening to a raw file by the very nature of that file. It has to have pre-sharpening applied, plain and simple. I shot the picture on the left at Great Sand Dunes National Park. The winds were blowing about 30 miles an hour. It was a brutal kind of, the sand would just scour your skin. And when I shot it, I knew I wanted it to be a high key black and white image. High key means we push it towards the pale end of the tonality spectrum, to the white spectrum. So, because I knew it would highlight the sand blowing and give it kind of this ethereal type feel in the dunes. So I did that. And I knew I was going to do that in post-processing. The image on the left is very boring to me. The image on the right, I love. I found a slate-throated redstart up in the Chisos Mountains last year. And when I was doing Klima Warbler tours, which is pretty rare, we actually had a female show up, had them doing nesting behavior, and then the female disappeared. It was very disappointing. But you can see the difference in the images. I captured it. And then the image, as after editing, the image on the left is too cluttered. There's branches. You know, I don't like the angle. I had the flash on camera, so I got a little gray eye. But once I post-process it and cleaned it up, it's a really nice image of the slate-throated redstart. So again, I didn't change anything as it was captured. I just reoriented it which I could have done by stepping over, but I didn't want to spook the bird because he was fairly close, as you can see. So I didn't want to spook the bird. I took the image where I was, and then I just made the adjustments in post-processing. I live near the Fort Davis National Historic Site, which is the best preserved fort in the American Southwest. And once a year in October, they do the lantern tour, which is amazing. And they walk down the hallway. Matt Walter, the gentleman dressed here, is a phenomenal historian. And I always go on his tours because he does it right at dusk when I've got some really nice light left. But he went into the hospital and he's carrying this lantern. And you see the original image on the right. Now, he's walking the whole time. So I can handhold these Olympus cameras one-handed with my screen open, and I can make adjustments on the fly with my fingers because I know my camera bodies really well. But even then, I can only do so much while he's walking, and there's other people around, right? And the picture on the right looks like it's from The Shining. The picture on the left makes you feel like here's a soldier doing last rounds in a hospital, you know, at dusk in this corridor. And I love that image on the left. So again, I didn't add anything that wasn't there. I just simply was able to open up what I captured by post-processing. All right, our 10th and final habit of how we want to make our photography worse is, by all means, always leave your camera in the auto or program mode because, hey, it's so smart. You spent thousands on it. It should be, right? Wrong. There is only, let me reiterate, there's only one time where your camera is relatively smart. That is when the sun is behind you at a lower angle and the light is shining on your subject. If it gets overcast, if you put the sun in behind your subject to the side, your camera gets really dumb for the most part, really dumb. Okay. Hearing Anna's hummingbird ticking around out there. I love that when they start grating their bill and it sounds like they're grinding their teeth. They just sound so angry. Here's an image of some cactus in Big Bend National Park where the camera's not getting the shot correct. It's either going to blow out the sky to open up the shadows on the cactus and the grass, or it's going to properly expose the sky and you're not going to get that real nice highlighting on the spines of the cactus. Snow kicks the camera's butt every time because it's trying to make it a neutral gray, 18% gray. You almost always have to overexpose. You always have to overexpose in snow to actually turn the snow white. I know that from the very start. So my camera in auto mode and program mode, your camera's probably not going to get this. Now they might have a snow setting where it'll get better, but I still wouldn't trust it. Particularly you got this dark buffalo, the dark trees, the dark water, your camera's going to be, it's going to just blow its mind. Winter Raptor Photography Workshop. How many of y'all have great shots of silhouetted hawks in the sky, right? Because the camera sees this scene and it sees all the bright light in the sky and it thinks, I've got plenty of light, but the bottom of that bird is in shadow. So I told my client before we ever hopped out of the truck to photograph this eagle, came right over the truck. I said, listen, you got to add 2 1/3 stops of light right now before you ever hop out. Get ready. You know, and actually I told them well before because I knew when they hop out, they're not going to have time to get that adjustment made. So auto mode or program mode, that's just going to be a silhouette of a golden eagle every single time. I've had people say, well, what about spot metering? If you're good enough to get a single point right on that golden eagle, rock on. I can probably do it at times, but man, I'm going to tell you what, I don't do it. It's a waste of time. What if my spot meter hits the sky? Then yeah, I'm going to have a nice silhouette. Okay. This is a client, a friend of mine, and we were so told Vista Overlook in Big Bend. I wanted the glass reflecting off his glass. I mean, the sun reflecting off his glasses. My camera in program mode would have never pulled that off. It would have made him too dark, or the reflection through his glass too dark. Wouldn't have accomplished it. And I'm not going to trust it to do it anyway. So again, you're going to have to learn either how to shoot manual mode or aperture priority or shutter priority and use exposure compensation with those two modes, or all in manual mode. I shoot manual mode 100% because that's how I had to learn from the very beginning. You don't have to shoot manual mode to be great. I know a lot of pros who don't, but for me, I'm a control freak and I want to be in charge of everything. So that's why I shoot that way. So those are the 10 habits that we want to develop if we are not interested, and I'll share those with you here in a minute. Let me go back to where you can see me, and let's answer some of the questions I know that were asked earlier.
Yeah, we'll see if I can get through. I think a lot of them were answered already, but I have some that I wrote down. One is now I'm not a photography person, so I may not be wording this right.
It's okay. I'll make fun of you anyways.
Thanks. 2 AF modes you have on lever. What are those 2 AF modes?
So both of them, the mode is continuous autofocus, but the configuration, one is the single point for the center, and one is the 3x3, the 9. Now, different camera brands have different autofocus point configurations, and you may not like 3x3 for birds in flight. You might like 5x5, but the key is I can switch quickly. So if I'm photographing a perched bird and I see a flying bird coming out of the left side of my eye, I don't have to try to hunt and find that to change those focus modes or points. I just flip the lever and I'm ready to go for birds in flight.
Awesome. There's a couple questions regarding what kind of storage system do you have for images? Do you use like cloud or a hardware backup? And then what capacity memory card do you use?
Great questions. I don't trust the cloud in the least. A friend of mine, the Abbotts, who have hundreds of thousands of images like myself, have all these images in the cloud, and the company notified them that they're no longer going to provide this service. So can you imagine, even if you have 1 gig service, the amount of time it is going to take to move all those images? Nobody providing an iCloud service cares a fraction about your images as much as you do. So a hardware backup system, multi backups where you might have 2 or 1 offsite, a third one offsite, is critical. My internet is fast enough for what we're doing, but it's not lightning fast up on top of this mountain. So just getting it all on the iCloud would take months probably. And I don't trust the little geeks running iCloud backup services to protect my images like I want. They don't care about my images, frankly. They care about my $9.99, $11.99, or $19.99 a month. And as soon as they don't care about that, then my service is done.
And what capacity memory card?
Okay, here's a good thing, and will save you some money. I'm going to tell a painful story on myself. I went to the Channel Islands to photograph the island scrubjay and hope to see the Santa Cruz Island fox and the subspecies of Pacific slope flycatcher and Allen's hummingbirds and what are some of the, I can't remember some of the other subspecies that are full-time on that island, but hopefully 1 or 2 of the snake species there and whatnot. And I had 12 memory cards in my memory card case. And before I got out, I took one out, put it in my camera, got on the boat. Halfway across, I've been shooting pelagic birds while we're going to Prisoner Harbor. And my memory card has an error. No big deal. I have 11 other memory cards. I start looking. This idiot had left his memory card case in my vehicle. And I saw the fox. I saw one of the snakes. I had the scrub jays taking sticks, pushing it in the end of cane, getting insects out within 15 feet of me. I had every subspecies of bird on the island, not a single shot. So the lesson is, even if you have enough memory cards, it doesn't do you any good if it's not on you. Okay. So here's what I recommend for your memory cards, which is what I had. You are way better off having 5 or 10 64 gigabyte cards than 2 256 gigabyte cards. Because if one goes down, you're toast. So you are better off to have multiples of smaller memory cards. Okay. Furthermore, if you fill one up and it has an error and you end up losing images, you're not losing as many as if you have a 256 gigabyte card. And you're also saving money. So the important thing is, buy as fast a memory card as your camera can record to. Please know, as memory cards get faster, it isn't always beneficial to buy the next fastest one because your camera may not even be able to record it that fast. So don't get tricked into spending more money unnecessarily. It's an expensive enough hobby, right? So more memory cards of a smaller size and a case to keep them on you. And if you have to nail it to your chest, do so that you don't leave it in the car. Okay. More memory cards, smaller size to try to reduce problems. And here's the thing. If you do have an error, don't format the card to fix it. There is recovery software that can often recover those images. SanDisk makes a recovery software. There's others. If you buy a SanDisk card, you can often download it for free for a year. So don't panic. Don't format something that has an error to try to fix it if you've got a bunch of great images on there. I say that having lost 1,700 in one night cards on a memory card of my best shots ever of common Blackhawks hunting and foraging. And I formatted the card thinking I could fix it. And I did not know about recovery software. This was many years ago. So I've had painful lessons myself. More memory cards, smaller size. There's multiple good brands out there. I have put all of the brands through the washing machine and dryer and they still work. So I don't know that I would say you've got to get this brand or this brand. I've had really good luck. I used to use a lot of compact flash cards with when I shot Canon. They're bigger, they're easier to keep track of, harder to lose. But I love that I can put more cards now that I'm using Olympus and we use SD cards. I'm back to being a bigger fan of SD cards now. But you do have to keep better track of them. Okay.
Very good. Cool. That's good. Hey, there was that question about how did you get the wing detail on the Hummingbird?
Okay. Yeah, ask about shutter speed and the black background. I saw that
right.
too.
Yeah, how do you get the black background?
So for high-speed Hummingbird photography, your shutter speed is useless if you're using flash. Okay? It's all about the duration of the flash. And I'm not going to go into a lot of the physics on the flash, but just know multiple flashes at very low power. At a very low power, a flash duration might be 1/10,000th, 1/12,000th of a second. So shutter speed is irrelevant only in the amount of ambient light it lets in. And we don't want ambient light coming in when we're using high-speed flash. If I'm shooting natural light, not high-speed flash, natural light Hummingbird photography, I'll go up to ISO 1600 or 2500 to get as high a shutter speed as I can. Now, a lot of y'all will think, well, I try to shoot at ISO 400. My starting point is ISO 800. You know, for bird photography, we're not using film anymore. These cameras are so much better than film cameras in terms of ISO. Why start so low and give yourself lower shutter speeds to begin with? So start at a higher ISO, get a faster shutter speed. I like wing blur on Hummingbird shots and I like it frozen. I like it all. So I try to shoot at least 1/2000th of a second, 1/2500th if I can with natural light. If I have to go down to 1/1200th, I will. You know, it just depends on how much wing blur you want and possible, you know, missing the shot because the Hummingbird started flying. But for flash photography, your shutter speed is almost completely irrelevant. Doesn't matter. How do I get a black background? So for natural backgrounds with high-speed flash, I take pictures of settings of backgrounds that I like and then print those off and put them back behind the feeder or the bird or the flower or whatever it is I'm photographing. For black backgrounds, I take like velvet. I like velvet. No, I'm teasing, you know, some black velvet or what's that other soft suede? Some lovely suede. You know, I take a background like that would come with a white box. Now you can buy backgrounds separately, and I'll put it over a piece of foam board. I put everything on foam board, whether it be a picture, I just clasp it to it, or I put the black velvet or suede or whatever it is over that, and I put it back behind the feeder, and I make sure no flash is hitting that. I want it as dark as possible. If you have light hitting the black, it'll show any imperfections on your background. So you want no light hitting the black background. For white, I have big sheets of white acrylic and I hit it with 2 flashes because I want the white to blow out completely. If you have, do you know what blinkies or highlight alert is on your camera? You want all the background blinking or highlight alerts, but you don't want that happening on your Hummingbird. With black backgrounds, you need a flash behind the bird shooting up towards the bird to give it a little bit of rim lighting to separate it from the background. And if you come out with me for a couple of days next year, you can do all that right out here, and I bring you drinks while you sit in your blind. So if you have a drinking problem, it's perfect.
That's good. Hey, the ant picture that you showed at the very beginning, someone had a question about the flash that you used on your camera for that ant picture.
So I have 2 different macro flashes. I wondered if I could get to them quickly. One is a Chinese word that I'm going to completely butcher, so I'm not attempting to be offensive at this point in time in any way, shape, or form. Kuarang, Kuangruang. They have these flashes that look like a typical Canon, Nikon, Olympus flash, but they have these two flexible arms that come off. They're only, I say only, 200 something bucks is cheap for flashes in general. But being Chinese, they're not prone necessarily to lasting a long time. I have been very fortunate and had no problems with mine. Some people have issues, but then I build a custom diffuser for that. Okay. I might have a picture somewhere. I mean, it's when I'm using that, more people stop and go, "Excuse me, sir, what are you doing?" than when I'm doing any other form of photography, because I'm usually kneeling outside a visitor center in the national park, dressed as a nerd, you know, with my flash and this get up and "Pardon me, sir, what are you doing?" "I'm photographing bugs." "Oh, okay. Yes, he is as weird as we thought, you know." Then I also recently got the Olympus macro flash. Most flashes made for macro create a very flat field, and the diffusion, commercial diffusion, is just terrible. You'll get specular highlights on bugs. That's those reflective bright spots. You get them on birds, but bug shells, you know, like arachnids and other things that have a hard carapace will often reflect light. So I create my own diffusion. The Olympus macro flash, I bought these little arms. Macro users always do homemade stuff. So you're not probably going to go out and just buy something and stick it on there, and I wouldn't, and be happy in the end. Macro people love to fiddle and piddle and create things. And if you're really into macro, I highly recommend one of my workshops too. But John and Kendra Abbott, their bug shot workshops are excellent for learning about all that stuff. But if you go to my social media, my Facebook page, Big Ben Birding and Photo Tours, or Instagram, I might have a picture or two of it out there that you can see. So my diffuser, I'll buy gray Roscoe Lux. It's kind of a paper type thing from B&H. And then you know, the mailers you put in an envelope to mail stuff to the post office, those kind of see-through, they're not really see-through, but they're kind of a white, crinkly material that you stuff inside an envelope. I take Roscoe Lux. This is the only time you'll see this grown man use a hot glue gun. But I was embarrassed. I went to Hobby Lobby and bought it anyways. And you can make a full-blown 4-alarm mess with those things. But I hot glue the Roscoe Lux inside the mailer, and then I hot glue craft wire around the edges so that it's malleable. I can shape and form and bend it to whatever I want.
That's something else, man.
That's a good saying, man. You're that nerdy. Yes.
I got one more question. If anyone else has any questions, you put them in the chat. Someone had about photography workshops for nectar feeding bats. Do you know anyone who does workshops for bats like that? Or maybe you do, I don't know.
Yes, if you'll look up Jeff Parker and Kathy Adams Clark, both of them are out of Texas. They actually often go to a spot in Arizona. They normally do it though, bats coming down to drink, and you can catch them in flight. You either have to go out and buy the expensive gear to do the high-speed flash stuff. I am trying to create this out here, but we have a bunch of feral donkeys where I live, and some of the residents aren't as fond of them taking a bullet as I am. So I'm struggling because the donkeys drink my bird blind water features down to nothing in a night, and I'm partially off grid, and I spend $70 for 1,000 gallons of water. It's okay. It's okay. So maybe someday I'll be able to offer bat photography once the feral donkey population has hit an appropriate level.
I think that was Tina who asked that question. Forgive me if it wasn't you, Tina, but also there's a friend of the festival, Daniel Grayson, who has a pond elephant head near Madera Canyon.
That's where a lot of
he does a lot of bat photography, and we usually have a festival trip with or two with him to go and photograph bats as well.
There you go. Yeah, I know there's other people that probably do it. Those are just two that I happen to know that do it. Have done it frequently. Kathy Adams Clark, who's an excellent photographer out of Houston, and Jeff Parker, who's out of Central Texas.
Awesome. I think that's all the questions I have, unless there's something else. But Lee, man, thank you so much. This has been great.
My pleasure, guys. And if you've got other questions, if you go out to my Facebook, you can find me, Lee Hoy, or you can find Big Bend Birding and Photo Tours. You can go to the website. You can send me an email, a text. I'm happy. What's in the tank on your shelf? That is desert hairy scorpions from y'all's neck of the woods and blue death feigning beetles also from your neck of the woods.
That sounds awesome. We need to do some night tours with you here in Tucson too.
Once I get once I get that night vision monocular, I'll let you know and we can go have some fun up there.
All right. That sounds awesome. Well, hope that we can do something again here soon. And I'm gonna let's see.
Hey, Luke.
Yeah.
I think Lee had a workshop slide he wanted to put up at some point.
Oh yeah, let me put that up for you. Hold on a second.
Thanks, Warren.
Whoops. Let's see here. Where do I get to my share screen? Yeah, thanks for reminding me of that, guys. I totally forgot about that. Share. So what you'll see here are just some of them. Galapagos Islands, my September 2021 is full. June 2022. I do have one coming up in October. We still have room for this October for 2 or 3 people. Might be short notice, but I do my Big Bend for WILDSIDE in July. Costa Rica, March, and we're expanding that. Yellowstone in winter, I love. That's one I think we've even added 2 a year for that. There's the Amazon Riverboat Cruise. I do Glacier National Park. If you like macro, the Panama one, we do dart frogs. Costa Rica, Panama, and Amazon are all good for macro too. My Capture the Hummingbird here at my house, July, August, September. And then the Winter Raptor photography tours are some of them that you can definitely check out. So would love to have you join me on any of those. And I also do just regular photography tours out in the Big Bend area. So if you just want a day or 2 photographing, then I can also accommodate you there. And I'll also throw up my social media for you as well. But Luke, I want to say thank you so much. It's always a pleasure and exciting to get to talk to different Audubon and photography clubs. And I never take it for granted that I'm asked and invited to do this. It's always very special and fun for me. And y'all giving your time to listen to the bearded goober here is also a treat and a privilege for me. So I just want to say thank you to all of you for giving me that chance. So thanks again.
Yeah, it's been really good. You can feel free to unmute yourself now if you guys want, and tell Lee verbally too, like what a great job you did. Thanks, Lee, for being here, and thank you all for being here as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lee.
Thank you.
Very helpful.
Very good, very good.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
I was on mute, but there was a few times where like I was like cracking up laughing too, as someone who's not really in photography, but like I was like in tune the whole time. So
Good.
thanks, Lee, and we'll stay in touch. And I'll send out an email with your information and a recording of the presentation and some other cool links to everyone here pretty soon. So
Cool.
have a good one.
Bye-bye, guys.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.